Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sarah Rhodes. I am the Ecosystem Management and Forestry Advisor, and I'm excited to be here today to talk to you guys about Forestry Camp, which is a really wonderful experience that we're excited to share with you. I have two of our Forestry Camp alumni here with us, and I'll have them introduce themselves. Please go ahead and say your name, pronouns,
We just dropped.
major, and what year you're in. Go ahead and start us off, Misako.
Hi, my name is Misako. I use the she, her pronouns and forestry major. I'm in my fourth year, and yeah, I look forward to this meeting with you all.
Yeah, I'm Garrett Hesser. I'm a third year forestry major and focus on water and forest and fire and I'll pass it off to Brendan.
I'm Brendan, I'm a fourth year EMF and CRS major. Had a great time at camp last year. Excited to tell you all the fun things that they might not tell you in the actual program.
Yeah, they're here to give you guys the inside scoop on Forestry Camp. So I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen to get us started. So this is our UC Forestry Camp info session. We're going to be recording this so that it can be sent out to the students who aren't here. Yeah, what is Forestry Camp? So Forestry Camp is an 8-week forestry immersion field experience. It provides students with an introduction to the scientific and professional dimensions of forest and wildland resource management. And I'm interested to hear from our panelists. How would you guys describe Forestry Camp?
Yeah, I think starting with the 8-week fully immersive class is a great way to start. I think it's a really neat opportunity, especially if you spent time in the woods or not, to go spend 8 weeks truly kind of disconnected from the normal buzz of city life here in Berkeley and to go learn about the forest in the forest. Something we often don't get to do living in the Bay Area is actually connect our studies here in the classroom with the trees and with the forest and with the fuel management projects, and to be fully immersed into that setting is, I think, a great way to describe it.
Yeah, Garrett hit on it. You'll be out in the field doing a lot of field work. You learn all these things in the classes. You're like, oh, this is how you sample out in the class, but now you're actually going out in the field. And I think the other unique side of it is that you're going to be with all like-minded individuals. You're with them for 8 weeks straight. You have 3 meals a day with them, so you really get a chance to connect with people, and you'll make lifelong friends, which will help you out in the field and career as you go on.
Sort of bouncing off of what Garrett and Brendan have said, we we learn a lot of things conceptually in classes, and then forestry camp is where you get to try your hand at it personally. And an important part of like forestry camp is also like the data that you collect is used by people who go to camp in the future. So if you're going to go this summer, then you'll probably see data entries by any one of us. And so that's how it builds a record. So what you do does matter.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing that perspective. So Forestry Camp is this magical experience where you're out there living in this beautiful forest for 8 weeks, and you spend essentially every day doing field work, going for hikes, learning about the rivers, the soil, the trees, the people that live within this community here. And so I think it's a really like wonderful, immersive place. You interact with the Meadow Valley Fire Department. I know students are doing prescribed burns up there, learning about indigenous ways of managing the land as well. And so this year's forestry camp is happening May 27th through July 18th. It's a little bit earlier this year, so right after Memorial Day. We are starting forestry camp, and that's because the faculty really want you guys to get a lot of practice doing prescribed burns up there this year. Plus, it'll be a little bit maybe cooler in that time of the year as well, which I think will be nicer for all of the faculty and students and instructors up there. Yeah, so to start us off, a question I get from a lot of students are there any prerequisites for forestry camp? There are not any set prerequisites, so nothing that is going to, if you don't have this, you won't get admitted to camp. But we do recommend that you guys have some basic ecology knowledge, plant biology knowledge, and some introductory course towards statistics. Any of my panelists want to expand on that or comment on, prereqs, and if you found that people were prepared or not prepared?
Yeah, I can start on the fact that certainly as nice as it is to go up there with some background knowledge, I think all of the courses are really well designed to, even if you feel like your knowledge on the native plant species or something isn't to the level it should be, the classes are all designed for you to learn that. And so even if you go up there just with kind of the basic knowledge that any number of classes here at Berkeley will give you in the ecological concept realm, in the plant species realm, in fire ecology, all of that is taught in such a way that's so hands-on. I think you absorb it that much better anyways. And so this is something, as long as you kind of have your basic entry-level forestry ideas, which being in the Berkeley Forestry program, I'm sure many of you do, I think you can easily get away with just learning on the fly as long as you're engaged, you're involved, and really focused on the classes you're in.
Yeah, certainly other background classes definitely help 100%. But for me, I was, from the East Coast, didn't know any of the native fauna out in California, really didn't take the tree taxonomy class before camp. But by the end of the third week, I was able to name the 60 or so, both the Latin name and common name, and identify it. So you'll be involved and you'll learn it. Like having classes before are nice, not necessary at all, as long as you're focused and doing that. And you'll be studying with everybody in the same class, and it forces you all to have the same knowledge. So you'll be fine.
Having a good understanding of R for the intro statistics can be helpful for some parts. And if not, like knowing how to use Excel can work just as well.
Thank you for all expanding on that. I will say that naturally there are going to be a lot of ecosystem management and forestry students at camp. There are often a lot of other Rouser College majors as well. That being said, I have seen history students go to camp, art students, rhetoric students, and you can imagine that those majors don't have a background in ecology and plant biology or statistics. And so it does not limit you if you haven't taken these classes. And I've had students go on to do really well at camp without this background. They tend to, need to work a little harder maybe in the beginning, but they still generally have a really, really wonderful time at camp. Yeah, so forestry camp is an intensive field learning experience. Forestry camp involves 11 units in 8 weeks. So, you can imagine that means you're going to be going fast paced with your learning, and it's going to be some intensive days. The program is broken up, and 105A is 3 weeks, 105B is 1 week, 105C is 3 weeks, and 105D is 1 week. I think I got that right. But it's broken up in that manner. They're different courses, but they all work together for the end result, which is 105D. I'm interested to learn from our panelists. Can you guys share, what did you learn in the Sierra Nevada ecology course, the 105A with Scott?
Yeah, so that one, we'll go out in the field a lot. Every day it's somewhere between like 5 to 10 plants a day that we'll learn. You learn how to identify them, the common name and the Latin name. So that's the field component where we go out, and then you also have some classroom time where you get a little bit of the history of the forest. We one day we went to Snake Lake, which was like a key moment in forestry research, and that's how a lot of our suppression was set up, and it was you'll find out the information was falsified. So it's really cool background, but say a lot of it is plant identification. But it seems hard and overwhelming at first, but when everybody's doing it, you will learn.
Yeah, I think 105A might have been the class with the most intense outdoor component. There's a lot of walking through, not a path. And yeah, you gotta learn how to bushwhack a little. But yeah, definitely the plant, like learning the plants, as long as you sort of collaborate and cooperate with your friends, then you'll be able to remember them faster and also better because you look at a plant and then you're told name it and some other things too sometimes. So just going over it with your friends and bouncing things off of each other is a good way to practice.
Yeah, I think 105A is one of the coolest introductions to forest management just because you learn all those things, you learn about the native plants, but then they're also incredible about bringing in guest lecturers. Ignacio, our famous Berkeley fungal guy, is here. He comes up and teaches us about all the different funguses in the forests, how those interact. We learned about insects, we learned about invasive species, we learned about fire. We learned about birds, we learned about soil, we learned about, I mean, all of these different components that play a role into the Sierra Nevada ecosystems. And I think it's a really incredible entry to kind of lead off the forestry camp in terms of you get kind of the scene, it sets the scene for the rest of the 8 weeks. And I think it's a really cool class and certainly was one of my favorites.
Yeah, just adding on, like I went in knowing nothing about Sierra Nevada ecology, and after 3 weeks, I felt like I was an expert and could, articulate a lot of things about it. So.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Does anyone want to share what skills you developed in 105B forest measurements?
You bet. Yeah. Forest measurements is awesome. Forest measurements is probably one of the more intense courses in terms of the getting the units in a week is they certainly make you work for it. And I think and that's a really fun part of it because I think in a lot of senses it is relatively realistic where you have a deadline, we have a project, we're going out and we were learning incredible skills on force measurement. We were doing density indexes, we were looking at fuel load. And so we were taking all of these measurements. We learned how to run plots. So we'd go through the forest. We'd learn how to do the individual plots in different forest settings. We learned how to measure DBH. We learned how to measure tree spacing, basal area, all of these figures that even if you don't know what those mean now, you will by the time you get into this class because you'll have to learn pretty quick. And it's super fun though, because it's fast paced. You get in these groups, you go out, you do the measurements. And you have a project by the end of the week. And so it's really a 1 week crash course on how to do forestry. If you're going to go cruise timber, if you're going to work as a forestry tech, all skills that are incredibly valuable.
I would say one other skill that we focus on is navigation. You have like you have to learn how to get to your plots to be able to take them because they're permanent plots. So yeah, that was like a skill that a lot of people had to work on, me included.
Yeah, it's 1 week. I wish it was longer, but it really is a crash course in all the hard skills. And especially if you're doing plot sampling, anything like that, if you're going to be on a field crew, it's definitely the most applicable hands-on week of that class. You will end up doing that stuff in the later two courses because you're taking that base knowledge and applying it to your overall project when you get to the last couple weeks. But like for anything that like even for job applications right now, I just say like all the hard skills I have on my resume came from that week and began learning in that week.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing that perspective. 105C, civiculture and utilization. What did you guys do in civiculture and utilization? And what is civiculture and utilization?
Go for it, Misako.
In silviculture and utilization, I think this class was 2 weeks, and it was split up 1 week in silviculture, 1 week in utilization. So silviculture, we went and visited two different timber companies up in the Quincy area, and we learned how they harvest timber differently. And then for utilization, we did let's just say a few mini projects with Rob, who, how do you even describe Rob? Um,
That's a
he's
great question.
he's not a professor, right?
Yeah, he's a professor. He's a
Okay,
professor
he's a
of
professor.
science. But he just doesn't work on campus. But yeah, Rob York is an incredible. We always did the joke at campus is the utilization week is a week of work for Rob. And so we go up, we have all these little field management projects that we get to plan and do. We ran like a mini logging and skidding operation with Rob. And so the utilization week is really cool because we also had a meeting to talk about like the new technologies in forest utilization, talking about mass timber and how we can start to talk about using the biomass in the woods that generally was viewed as unusable. And so you're learning about the utilization of timber is a really important part of our jobs as foresters or as people interested in forest health is how do we use the products that we are removing to build a more resilient system. And silviculture, I would describe as just forest management in general. So it was really cool. We did tours, as Masako said, looking at different timber companies, looking at the Forest Services projects, and seeing how different forest companies and federal agencies manage the woods and how those impacts are affecting fire frequencies and all of the things that affect our daily lives.
Yeah, it really ties in the commercial and the more relevant side of it. You know, the first 3 weeks you learn plants, you can identify plants, cool, and then you can measure trees, cool. But then what do you want to do with that, and how do you make it, you know, relevant to society today? And obviously, we all need timber and everything. So those couple weeks really start showing the commercial side of it, the different industries within it. A lot of it is timber because it's what we use it. But there are other things you'll learn the new, as Garrett mentioned, like mass timber products. It's a new emerging technology. There is the research side of it too, that'll be touched on. So it really is kind of the applications of what you will do with timber that you've measured beforehand.
Thank you guys. So our final class, ASPM 105D, Forest Management and Assessment, what was that course like for you guys?
That was very fun. Essentially, it's designed that those last 2 weeks is a culmination of everything you've learned. So you start off, you're given a plot of land. I think the one that I was on was like an 89-acre stand. And you go out, you create your own, you set your own plots, you make your own plots. We did, I think it's 12 plots each. You get those measurements, you run it through the FP, the forestry, what's it, FIA kind of thing, to kind of get your data. And then from that, you use that to you set your goals for your management plan, and kind of compile a document that's like a mini timber harvest plan. So it's kind of like if you're interested in being a RPF specifically or just any other kind of forest manager, it really is just a 2-week crash course where you will be given a stand, you're set, you make your own, what goals do you want, you assess the forest, what do you want, and it just compiles everything. It's not exactly like you're not going to be, you have some class time, obviously, and you sit down there, but a lot of it's free time where they give you the task, you're given the stand, and then you go with your group to whatever forest and you're on your own sitting there and creating your own plots and taking your own measurements. So this is more like the first 2 weeks it's class, class, class. The second week it's class and then a little bit on your own. The third week it's again kind of more project-based class. And then this last one, it's just you have the project, it's your own time kind of thing. Like I think we had 3 or 4 full days to completely to ourselves to go out and like assess our own stand. So it builds everything, and you will be once you do that, you can again list that on your resume, and people look at that know the program. They can look at that, and if you successfully completed that, you're already a leg up in any job that you're competing for.
I do agree that the the last class is a lot of independent work, and you have to make sure that you're able to get things done, whether it be like in the field at your area in your stand, or if it's back at camp or in town if you need the Wi-Fi to complete like the written portions. So learning how to manage your time and again cooperate with your group, that was something that I thought was very important because group work. Yeah, learning how to do those things and being able to implement it will make sure that you can get through this last class safely. Safely.
And I think another really neat part of it is at the end, you have to learn how to articulate all of this information you've just collected and then present to a group of professional foresters. And so it's a really neat kind of culmination of everything we've learned. You have to sit there and critically think about, okay, what does this actually mean for forest health? What does it actually mean for forest resilience, right? And you collect all this data, you articulate it into this report, and then you have to take it out into the woods, go out into the stand with these professionals and present on your findings and your management decisions. You get questioned on it. Was it the right management decision or was it not? That's up for debate depending on what you chose. But it's a really fun way to kind of wrap up the 8 weeks with a really, what feels like a really meaningful project. And it's certainly a great way to consider all of those new skills you've developed.
Thank you all. Some things I want to touch on or expand on is we mentioned one of the professors, Rob York. We've also talked about Ignacio. And Forestry Camp is taught by both Berkeley professors as well as cooperative extension specialists from the UC Natural Reserve or UC resources, I forget the title of it, but the research stations within California, and then also Berkeley Forest Cooperative Extension faculty and researchers at those areas, and then also some guest speakers from like the community. So it's a wide variety of instructors that you're going to have access to, and it's a really great way to connect with faculty and professionals in a way that you definitely don't get on Berkeley's campus. And I've had many students go to Forestry Camp, and then I'll talk to them in the fall, and they're like, "Oh, I'm working in Miranda Redmond's lab. I met her at camp, and yeah, she offered me a spot in her lab or the fire lab." And so it's a really great also networking opportunity. There's also a lot of alumni engagement with Forestry Camp, and like Brendan mentioned, people know what Forestry Camp is. They know, you know, when you go to camp, the skills that you learn there, and it does give you a leg up in that field and in that industry. So it's a really, really valuable experience.
Yeah, hitting on that. I was one of the examples there where Miranda was the taught us in either fifth or sixth week, and then I just went after class. I'm like, "Hey, do you have any positions in your lab?" And she's like, "Yep, email me after the summer and we'll find out." Now I'm in her lab. I'm gonna do research with her this summer for one of her projects out in Colorado. So it's a huge networking thing too.
Yeah, thanks for expanding on that, Brendan. So, big question, right? Like, how much does Forestry Camp cost? It is 11 units. That's no small number. So for UC students, we follow the summer sessions tuition rates. And so it's $419 per unit. And then there's a $452 one-time campus fee. This totals $5,061 for this summer. Housing and food costs are paid for by the Schwalbacher Endowment. So housing at Forestry Camp, which we're going to get into in a little bit, room and board is covered during your time at Forestry Camp. You're not paying, any housing costs at camp. And then food is covered during the week. So Monday through Friday, the students are fed 3 meals a day. And so that is a cost saving benefit that we are grateful for. And then many of our students are eligible for summer financial aid, which can cover some or all of the cost of forestry camp, depending on your aid package. And then I'll also say that our ecosystem management and forestry students, often our low income students will receive scholarships to cover the difference in tuition if they qualify. So those are some of the financial support available for forestry camp. And as always, I would recommend talking to the financial aid office to see what is available to you. Another big ticket question is, what is the housing like at forestry? What does this free room and board look like? Any of my panelists want to describe it for us?
100%. Yeah. So we can start, and there's a couple different ones. I stayed in a shanty. Did you guys stay in bunks or shanties?
I was in a bunk.
I
Okay,
was in a bunk too.
cool. Then I'll talk about shanties. So shanties are super cool. They're these little cabins basically. Depending on how many people are there, you can either have 2 people in a shanty, 1 person in a shanty. It just kind of depends on the number of students at camp. But these shanties are super cool. They're like a 10 by 12 cabin. The first half of it is like built out of wood, and then there's a screened in portion. So it's basically like a large standing wall tent. There's beds in there, there's desks, bookshelves, and they're a really kind of cool setting to live in. You feel certainly as if you're camping pretty much for these 8 weeks, but you do have the bed and all the necessities. And it's really neat because all the shanties are lined out. They're in different groups and sections, and you certainly build a community amongst all of the campers, and you have these picnic tables and whatnot between them. And certainly, depending on the weather, you want to have a bunch of blankets or a sleeping bag to have with you because it is open air. And so you definitely want to make sure you're prepared. Some of those mornings in Quincy were pretty cold, especially early on in the summer. And so they're really quite a cool setting, though, because I certainly for myself felt as though I was very connected with nature. You're sleeping there, you walk out your door, and you're immediately in the woods. And then there's bathhouses that are all kind of shared amongst the bunkhouses and shanties, but those are all showers, bathroom, the normal necessities. The water is heated with a fire, which is really cool. There's a fire team. I was on it this year, and we basically had to wake up every day at like 5 and put firewood in so that everybody in the morning would have hot showers. And then when we get back from class, we put more fire in or put firewood in and make sure that everybody had hot water. But yeah, the shanties are awesome. They're super fun. And I'll let you guys mention the bunkhouses.
Yeah, so the bunkhouses, they're just essentially a long row of rooms. They're also made for 2 people, but if I remember correctly, they're a bit larger than the shanties in like square footage. Yeah, so they're also for 2 people. I the floors are concrete and then the walls are all wood. There's 2 windows. What I like to do was I would leave the windows open at night and then close them as soon as I wake up in the morning so that I can catch some of the cold air from the night. They're pretty good. I will say the walls were a bit thin. I could hear my neighbor sigh in the room next door. But yeah, generally I enjoyed it. Again, like sleeping bags are also a good idea, I think. Just because there's also like, at least for us, there's a field trip where we camped. So like I just slept in my sleeping bag the whole time.
Yeah, that's pretty much. It's a nice experience. I personally would recommend the bunkhouse. Garrett will probably recommend the shanty. I think the bunkhouse, if you're there for 8 weeks, it's kind of nice to have a place that's not exposed to the air the entire time, but that's all up to your opinion. Just fair warning as far as like food and I mean, you're gonna be in the woods. There are critters. So you have to do your best and you'll get the rundown from the camp manager and all this, but if you have food in there will end up being mice, so don't have that in there. And as much as you try and avoid it, it doesn't matter if you have a shanty or a bunkhouse. There will be little critters in there. It's fine. You're in the woods, but just know that will probably happen.
Yeah, the chipmunks really like to steal my Twix bars, so you gotta be prepared. They you gotta put your food in a box or in the fridges because they will find a way to figure out how to get your food. Um, but yeah, both options are really great. The bunkhouses are certainly more enclosed. If you think about like almost like hotel rooms in a row, and then the shanties are all their own individual little cabins, kind of in clusters. They call them cluster groups amongst the camp. So all great options though, and they all have new beds, and they're working on putting all new mattresses in most of them. So my shanties had new mattresses, and so it's super comfortable. Some of the bunkhouses are still working on getting their new ones, but they're supposed to get them this spring. So, um, all in all, super fun experience in terms of the housing.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Can you describe what your average day at forestry camp looks like?
Well, the schedule was very regular. Breakfast is at 7. It's recommended that you pack your lunch, all ingredients provided before you go and get your breakfast. So you have to have a container for your lunch. And yeah, so have breakfast and then class starts at 8 sharp. No Berkeley time. And then generally like there'll be like it'll depend by the class, but the morning is more likely to have lecture, and then starting from any point in the morning until maybe 2 or 3 in the afternoon, you'll be outside or in the vans going places. And dinner's at 6. Uh, the cook will ring the bell, or somebody will be assigned to ring the bell. And so you go in, and sometimes there's also evening lectures, but besides your class time and whatever homework or plant studying you need to do, it's your free time.
Yeah, I think depending on the crews, everybody has tasks as well. So you all get assigned a task if you're on the kitchen cleaning crew or on the fire crew or any number of different tasks. And so that'll oftentimes be worked into your daily schedule depending on what you're doing. I think also there's certainly always blocks of free time, sometimes after lunch or even after dinner. I'd often find myself going down to the rivers. There's plenty of rivers around, and going fishing or going hiking, and doing things in the evening. So there's lots of time in the evenings for socializing, as long as very class dependent, as Masako said, but there is a lot of time to go explore the Quincy area. Oftentimes people would go into town after studying in the evening to go into the library or go get food at the grocery stores. And so lots of flexibility kind of after that dinner time, depending if you have night class or not. But yeah, I'd say the same thing average day. If you're on the fire crew, it starts a little earlier than 7, but other than that, it's pretty consistent.
Yeah, I'd say the timing is the classes. I wouldn't say there's like an average day per your class schedule, or like your what you're doing, because you would be in this field and that. Like there might be a lecture this morning, or you might just be going a road. But it's like the hard times are when you eat, like 8 a.m. when you eat. They try their best to get back to camp around 4 or 5, depending where we're at. So you have a little bit of free time before actual dinner. Um, but really structure around that. Like for me personally, like I would get up early. My friend and I, there's a gym in town. We'd go in the morning before. It sucked. I hated getting up early, but then you come back, go through your classes, and then a lot of us would go out to eat after, even if we got back early enough. Funny enough, we actually our camp chat texted about the local place, Polka Dots. You will end up seeing where that is. It's awesome. A lot of that, and then at night, personally, I was always at the campfire every night. Um, Pretty much what for me it was like past 8 p.m. I was done studying and I was just hanging around the campfire and talk, have a couple drinks with whoever's there and just kind of hang out.
Great. Thank you guys so much for describing what the day is like at forestry camp and also talking about the variability that can happen between the different sections of coursework. Yeah, so I want to open it up to our audience, get your guys' questions answered. Feel free to raise your hand or pop your questions in the chat and I can direct them to our panelists. And while you guys are coming up with, ooh, okay, great question. I'm currently a freshman ES major, and I would love to attend camp 1 year, but haven't taken any forestry specific classes. Would it be recommended to me to attend camp as a sophomore or junior instead, especially with the classes being upper division? I can kind of speak and I, encourage you guys to all like jump in as well. You can always apply to forestry camp. Forestry camp happens every summer. And so you can always apply. Depending on the volume of applications we have, it varies how competitive it can be. I know that we have had students go after the summer between their freshman and sophomore year. You may and likely would be better prepared going the summer between your sophomore and junior, or junior and senior summer. I don't know if you guys have any other perspective on that though.
Yeah, I think ideally the program is set up if you're a sophomore, you don't need that at all. We had two students that they were both incoming master students, but their degrees were nowhere near forestry. And the first thing they did at Berkeley was go to that camp. And it was a huge benefit to them because they really got immersed in the community right away. We had a couple students that it was like they had their spring semester, they technically graduated, but then came to camp to kind of finish off a couple degrees. So honestly, anytime, if it's right for you this summer, I would say like it really depends on you have a field crew that you could be working on this summers or just go to camp. I'd say if you don't have like a job that you like are really attached to for the summer, go to camp always first way, because then that'll help you get jobs thereafter. And really it's especially as a freshman too, if you like um obviously I'm sure have tons of friends and whatnot, but in the forestry side of it, you will get to know a lot more people. And it's a lot nicer going through the rest of your Berkeley career with such a tight-knit group of people after. So I'd recommend going early as possible, just so you can build your community as soon as possible. And that helps so much for the rest of your time at Berkeley.
I'd also just really say, if you're an environmental science major right now as a freshman, I wouldn't be surprised if you're a forestry major by the time you leave camp. So
You will convert to forestry. We have our ways.
We're not a cult though. But
Thank you, Taco.
indeed.
I mean,
Okay, we're
maybe.
close. It's close. But yeah, like how both of them have said, like you really gain a community. I mean, you're spending 8 weeks together. And it's 24 hours. That's probably more time like than you spent with anyone besides your family in your life. So, like, yeah, it'll be like it could be a good experience. You might also see what you want to do or what you don't want to do. I think this will be a good sort of exploratory experience, and you also get some hard skills that you might be able to use somewhere down the line.
Thank you, everyone. We have some questions in the Q&A box, which I'm taking both questions in the Q&A box and the chat. So, throw them wherever and they'll get asked. Will there be places to connect devices like hair dryers at camp?
Yes, you have electricity in your shanty and bunkhouses. It's all electricity. As far as Wi-Fi, I'm sure that's probably a question. You will not have Wi-Fi in your specific camps. There is a building at camp that you can all go to where it is connected to Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, if there's more than 3 people there, it really sucks. So you usually ended up going into town at the library. The library was all the people knew who we are because it happens every year that all the forestry camp students go there and connect there. So when you have to do your project and stuff, it's better to go to the library. But as far as like general appliances, you have that in your room, but you do not expect to have internet access all the time while you're at camp. Because even that building, the Wi-Fi it's not made to handle 30 plus students.
Also of note is that there is very little cell signal, and you also don't get data. So yeah, your best way of contacting people is probably by snail mail, but that is also iffy. Or, again, you go into town and get the Wi-Fi at the library. Yeah, I had a thought. I just can't remember what my thought was anymore.
That's okay. I can build off your question, Misako. And a person asked, like, how do you talk to your loved ones via email, text, calls? Like, is there a time to do that? How do you chat with the outside world?
Yeah,
I
you
mean, I just went to, the one building with Wi-Fi in the middle of the night when nobody was there.
and then town is a 20-minute drive. And honestly, once you find your community of friends and whatnot, you'll probably have a regular crew that you go into town and do different things. And you'll go, like, I was probably in town at least 3 out of the 5 days during the school week, and you can contact and call them there. It's not that far. There's a chance you could get a little bit of cell signal at camp. There's like some crazy times I was sitting at a campfire and suddenly my dad was calling me and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can actually talk to him right now. So it's not like you're completely in the middle of nowhere. It's a very short drive to anywhere. And if you don't have a car, there's plenty of people that have cars up there. That make friends with people. If you don't have a car, make friends with people that have a car right away. That way they'll drive you there. And the TAs will also have times that if there's enough people that don't have cars, they do like runs into town that you can all go in and do grocery shopping or just kind of go to the library and stuff like that.
Another question from the chat is what are the weekends like?
Yeah, the weekends are pretty flexible. There's no class on the weekends generally. And so it's pretty much your time. If there's people that have cars, some people go on trips. Oftentimes we'd kind of do camp organized trips. We went up to Lassen National Park and we did some trips to the lake. And so there's oftentimes kind of little adventure excursions occurring amongst different groups at the camp. I would often spend my time down at the river. There's so many rivers up there, and I was a big fisherman. And so literally, if I was there on the weekend, I was probably at some river or lake somewhere hanging out. But it's really your time. Some people would just relax and kind of spend the day around camp. Others would go into town and spend the day at the library if they wanted to kind of reconnect with the outside world. And so really, it's your time. It's your time to figure out what you want to do. I would totally recommend taking full advantage of being in a really unique place in Northern California. They call it the Lost Sierras for a reason. It's very few tourists and a kind of really unique place to go explore. It's all national forest land around there, so there's no shortage of trails and roads and places to go check out. So
Yeah,
Oh yeah, go ahead, Brendan.
the weekends are your free time. Like you can do whatever. There are some people that they were close enough, they went home every weekend. I personally wouldn't recommend that. I think that you're in this unique place right now, and the weekends are the time that you can, especially like at the end of your classes, because like let's say the end of 105A, you took your final that weekend, you do not have to worry about school at all. There is no project next week because it's going to be it's essentially a brand new course next week. That's a time that you can really go with the people that you're at camp with, choose something to do that weekend, hang out and get to know them even more outside. You will have plenty of time to get to know them, but you don't have that added academic stress, for those, those weekends that you're not worrying about projects. But you can do anything. It's cool. Like I think there was the last mechanic trip. We cowboy camped one time just on the trail, which is a great experience. Some people went to different towns. I think there was a crew that did backpacking in the Tahoe area. I was part of a crew that went down to Chico and spent a weekend there. So it's whatever you want to do. But I can't stress enough, find a group of people that you want to do it with at camp, because those are memories that you'll have for a lifetime.
So thank you.
Yeah, my one thing about the weekends is that you do not get fed on the weekends except for Sunday dinner. So it is up to you to figure out food, whether it be that you're going to go into town and eat there, or if you're going to buy food and have it in the dining hall for you to have, or if you're going to save leftovers from Friday dinner to have on Saturday, or if you're going to stretch it out.
Thank you for bringing that up, Misako. That's a really good point. I have some kind of logistical questions in our chat, so I'm just gonna kind of run through those and answer them myself. When should we expect to hear back from the program after we apply? So the application deadline is March 12th. And from there, it's a really long process that our forestry faculty take really seriously in making decisions on who can come to camp. So Their deadline is April 3rd. I will hound them for this deadline, but they do need to take that time to review all of the applications. For example, last year we had 100 applications. Another question is how many students attend camp? There are about 35 spots for campers. So last year 100 people applied and 35 people got spots. So in terms of how competitive it is, it depends on the pool each year. Last year, we had a lot of EMF students apply and attend. I think there were 8 non-EMF spots available. This year, I expect it to be a little less EMF heavy, which means other majors will be open to attend. But just to give you a sense of like how the application process works is we automatically accept all EMF students because it's a degree requirement for them. It's a great way, to get guaranteed admission to campus to be an EMF student. But then the non-EMF spots are doled out. And then we have a ranked wait list in which I will reach out to you and say, you are number 1 on the wait list, you are number 2 on the wait list. And then when people drop out or decide that they aren't going to attend camp, then I work my way down the wait list. Sometimes late into the year or closer to the summer, I'm contacting you being like, hey, it's your turn. And I had a student get offered a spot 2 days before camp and then they accepted and they were there. So it really varies depending on the wait list. I also just want to cover this really quick and then I'll pass it back to the panelists, but are you able to declare a forestry minor before applying? How does that work? So going to forestry camp gives you 4 of your 5 classes you need for the forestry minor. So at camp, I send like a minor declaration form for all of those students. You won't be declaring the minor before you go to camp, and declaring the minor doesn't help you get into camp. All right, now that I just word vomited at all of you for a while there, I'll get back to the panelist questions. Can anyone bring a car, and how does it work if you don't have a car?
Yeah, I think anybody can bring a car. There's plenty of parking. I'd recommend if you have a car, if you have the access, certainly there's no harm in bringing it. It opens a lot of doors. But if you don't have a car, I certainly wouldn't stress it either. I think when we were up there was probably 15 or 20 cars, and so there was always somebody going somewhere. And so if you didn't have a car, you could always jump in with somebody from camp. And as Brendan mentioned earlier, if you don't have one, certainly kind of go out of your way too to make friends that are kind of using their cars, traveling. It makes life a lot smoother if you just have somebody that you can say, hey, you mind if we go into town today or go do this? And it's a very nice resource to have those people around with cars, but certainly anybody can bring one. So if you have one and you want to bring it on up.
And just a note about cars, they are dirt roads there. Pretty much any car will be fine on it. Just be a little caution. Like we had somebody that had they had a Charger up there and it did fine at camp, but they are dirt roads. There are bumps and potholes. So if you're gonna take your car up there, just be aware of that. You don't need 4-wheel drive unless you really want to go off-roading or whatnot, but just be aware it's not not freeway roads.
Yeah, there's also gravel roads. So I don't have a car, but some of the people at camp, they were saying that their cars, they're a bit low to the ground. So there were times where they're like, I don't think I'm going to take my car for like this project or up to this place. So that was something that was of consideration to people.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, our last question. Does anybody have any application tips for filling out the forestry camp application?
Be an EMF major.
On a real note, there's certainly highlight your experience. If you have any forestry directly related experience, certainly bring that to the front of your application. If you don't have any forestry related experience, which I'm sure many of you don't, many people at camp didn't going into camp. That's the whole point, is to get the really hands-on forestry related experience. highlight your interest, highlight why you want to be in camp, why that will impact the rest of your educational experience, how that might impact your career choice. That's what people are really looking for, is they want to build a community that is all driven around the same central goal of improving forest resilience, improving forest health, and making a difference. And so if you really highlight in your application why that's important to you and why you want to incorporate that into your education, I think that's certainly an important point to keep in mind.
Yep, I agree. I don't think that I can add much more to that. It's also be genuine, I guess.
Yeah. And I can't like, as Garrett hit on it too, but really stress like being part of a community, because even if you like, which is going to be impossible, even if you took nothing away, you didn't learn anything from that camp. It's that group of people you went with and those lifelong connections that you'll know, and you'll be like, down the road, you graduate in 5 years, that guy that you went to camp with, you're like, hey, can I have a job? Boom. So really stress like the importance of wanting to get in a community and working towards, environmental goals.
I think our panelists gave great tips. The faculty are genuinely passionate about forestry camp and want to get your understanding of why you're applying to camp, what this is going to do for you and your career and the broader forestry community by you getting a spot at forestry camp. So be genuine and passionate in your responses, and I think that's what will really shine. Okay, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. It is now 2:01, so I want to thank everybody for coming to our info session today. Forestry Camp applications are open now till March 12th. I will be sending this recording out, and if anybody has any questions, they can email at crs.emf.ugrad@berkeley.edu. Also highlighting one of our peer advisors, Sonia, is a Forestry Camp alumni, and she has office hours, so you can come and ask her all of your questions as well. Yes, thank you all so much. Have a good rest of your day.